No worries. All right. So if you are in here for a Tier 2 math interventions, you are in the right place. My name is Jennifer Sears, and my partner in crime who is helping run tech today and also going to be presenting is Tammy Gaudet. And we would like to welcome you. We're just going to do a little disclaimer here because this is going to be a really fast, down and dirty, quick 30 minutes. We're going to be throwing a lot of information at you. And we just wanted to make sure that if you have any questions, please go ahead and plop those into the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat as we go. If you have any questions, we'll try to save a little time at the end, and we'll try to get you out on time so that you can make sure you get your lunch and a few other things before you go to your afternoon sessions. So welcome. Let's go ahead and go over those goals for today. And we are looking at defining what Tier 2 instruction is. We are also going to recognize what's the difference between a strategy and an intervention, if you had wondered. And we are going to be identifying the steps for implementing Tier 2 interventions with you today. All right, so a couple of the areas that we're going to go over, we're going to start with the idea of what is Tier 2. And then Tammy's going to go into interventions versus strategies and what those are. And then we're going to talk a little bit about data. And then finally, how can we make that work in your classroom? All right, the first graphic that you're going to see, this is kind of just an area, a quick kind of visual to give you an idea of what we're looking at when we're talking about the different tiered system. So as you can kind of see, we're looking at, there's 3 different tiers. We have a Tier 1, a Tier 2, and a Tier 3. Our Tier 1 is about 80% or more of our students. Our Tier 2, which we're going to talk about that's more small group targeted, and that's about 15% of our students. And then we have our Tier 3, those are those intense interventions, possibly our students in special education, and those are about less than 5% or so of our students. We have some great descriptors there, so if you want to go back and kind of look at that, that kind of gives you a little bit more of information, but we're going to just gloss over them really quickly today. So you can't talk about Tier 2 without talking about Tier 1. So when we're talking about Tier 1, we're talking about whole group instruction, starting that first day of school. And you're going to have the teacher yourself providing those professional teaching strategies for that first teach. Okay, these could also include sheltered instruction and differentiated instruction. But that first teach, that very first teach, that is what we're talking about when we're talking about in Tier 1. So that's when you're employing those instructional routines, when you're doing those learning rotations, that could be either in Read 180 or Math 180. If we're talking about those particular things, there are also like different tasks that you can promote, like reasoning or problem solving, those day-to-day activities like questioning, using your mathematical practices, giving your formative assessment, doing discourse, mathematical discourse. Those are your things that you're going to do in your first teach to really start and address that particular content that you're doing with the kids that day. So that is very different from Tier 2. If you went ahead and clicked onto the next one. So targeting Tier 2 is really if a student does not learn a particular concept from that first teach, or they're struggling to learn it, they may have to be moved into what we call that Tier 2. That Tier 2 is that intense, focused, small group instruction. We really want to emphasize that. It's not a whole group. It is very focused and intense in a small group setting, okay? If the student is grasping that concept, once they've had this instruction within Tier 2, they can then return to a Tier 1 learning environment. But if students who continue to fail to make any progress from a Tier 2 setting, usually are moved into a Tier 3. All right. What is Tier 2? Again, we've emphasized that Tier 2 is small group instruction. How long are we talking? Well, it's about 20 minutes every day for elementary, and we're looking at that 20 minutes for middle school and high school for 3 times or so a week. We want to make sure that it is research-based. That's an important word in this. It has to be something that is a research-based. It can't be something that we just pull out of the hat. It's very intense and targeted toward a specific area, a particular topic or something that they might be struggling in. And when we look at research-based curriculum, we have some of those listed there. We would be talking about iStation, iReady, Benchmark, Stepping Stones, Foundations, Math 180, or Advantage Math, to name a few. We're not going to go into those specific curriculums today. This is not a training for that. What it is going to be is just kind of an overview to let you know what is out there. All right.
Okay, so strategy versus an instructional intervention. What we have heard and talked to people about is the confusion between a strategy and an instructional intervention. So with a strategy, that's what you do with your tier 1, your whole class. You're working with them. It could be, I'm going to pull in some Kagan cooperative learning activities with them. I'm going to pull in a three reads where I read the problem with the 3. That is a strategy that I'm using, trying to hit multiple learners. An intervention is very different. And because an intervention is targeting a specific skill, misconception, as here it said, an area of weakness, but really we're trying to target a certain area. And it has to be formalized, meaning that you can't just have that, I'm going to bring in a graphic organizer. No, we have to think about what specific skill I need. So if it's fractions, adding and subtracting fractions, then how am I going to teach it? And then how am I going to assess that they have made it? And interventions have all of that. It has to be where you're monitoring it, where you're documenting it on tier 2. So here is an example of some strategies and interventions. I want you to take a second, read through these just based upon our general description. I want you to think about which one is an intervention. Don't do anything yet, but just look over this. I'll give you a second to read through that. Okay, in the chat, go ahead and put which number you think is an intervention on this list.
Seeing some 7s. Seeing a 3. Not sure what the U might be, but 4 and 7. 3 and 7. 4. A lot of these fact families, 4 and 3 make 7. Wow.
All right, thank you everyone for that participated. Number 3, giving you a heads up, number 3 is actually a strategy. It's a way you could teach. If you did whole group teaching, where I do something on the board, then I have the kids try it out and we do it together and then you do it. That is a strategy. 4, if you look at number 4, that was another one that actually that was mentioned in the chat, is blended words. In that one, I know a specific skill that I need them to work on with short vowels. I know I want to get monitor it by iReady. So right there when it said monitor, you know that was an intervention. And also 7 was mentioned a lot. 7 is also an intervention because I am going to work with order of operations. I am going to monitor it through iReady, and then I'm going to work with the kids on that. So 4 and 7 were our interventions. The others are great teaching techniques, but they're strategies. So in here today, what we're going to be doing is since this is a general overview of tier 2, we're going to, Jennifer and I keep saying we, are going to go ahead and go over these 7, just giving you a little bit more information of kind of the steps you'll need to go through when you start looking at your students that are struggling a little bit.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about gathering accurate screening data on all students. Now, the screening data that we are going to be talking about in this particular instance, and that you guys are going to be more likely exposed to, actually you are likely, very likely to be exposed to, is that your students are going to go through what is called the I-READY diagnostic. Okay, you see up there that that is K through 8. So we're talking K through 5 math interventions right now. They will be taking a I-READY diagnostic that is going to tell them how they do in particular areas in and around mathematics. Now, let me let you know, this diagnostic is given 3 times a year. It's given at the beginning of the year, at the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. And it's really especially important, especially for the very first one that they're going to be taking, to be thinking about having the students motivated and prepared to do their best, because this data is going to basically drive and help with your planning in terms of what your Tier 2 interventions are going to be. All right, so it's very important to know that that I-READY diagnostic is going to be coming up. There will be further training on that. That'll be coming up probably when you guys start the beginning of the school year. But for now, that I-READY diagnostic, it's very important to get that reliable and valid data, especially when you're thinking about that and planning those Tier 2 interventions. So kind of knowing ahead of time if students are prepared and motivated to do their best, they're going to give you their best on that for that particular data. All right. So what we wanted to show you here, the next step in the stages of implementing Tier 2 is that once you have this data, you have to analyze it. So to that measure, we have also provided you the actual tool, the actual report that is going to help you probably the best in terms of identifying those students who are in the most need. In I-READY, from that diagnostic, the best report to access is going to be what we call an instructional groupings report. And what this report does is it characterizes, it's a bunch of different characteristics based on how the students performed on that diagnostic that kind of group them into particular areas of need. Okay, so if you're looking at, you can see across the screen, we have 5 groupings. That group 1 is where students are usually 2 or more grade levels below. And the way I-READY identifies it is they really look at the different strands. In this case, numbers and operations, or algebra and algebraic thinking, are very important strands that we know inside of mathematics. That will tell you those particular areas where students are falling 2 or more grade levels below. And you notice that you're going to get, you know, a different amount of kiddos in each of those different groupings. Now, depending upon how many students you have in that particular group, I can kind of see group 2, which is students that are 1 or more grade level below in those particular areas. You might be able to differentiate those students even more based upon maybe there's a particular skill, as Tammy mentioned, that they are needing to be working on. So you can kind of, let's say you have 9 kiddos in that group, maybe you want to whittle that group down into 4 that are really working on particularly addition and specifically doing 2-digit addition. And maybe that other group might be, you know, doing 3-digit addition. So it's kind of like a particular skill that you want to be able to whittle them down a little bit more in. Our group 3 are students that are on or above. So you kind of have an indicator of where the students are at. That's that middle range, on or above. Group 4 are students who are on or above as well. And that might be in a particular different area in terms of the domain that we're talking about. It might be in numbers and operations, or it might be in like geometry or measurement. Kind of a little bit to help you not just remediate the students, but we also want to think about Tier 2 is also therefore enriching the students. So that's where you have your students who are in group 4 or group 5, where they might be above a grade level in a particular domain. And when we're talking about Tier 2 interventions, we might be intervening in terms of not just remediating, but enhancing those particular skills that we also want the students to do. So you're going to need to analyze that data that comes in from that report. And we did have somebody that asked the question about, does iStation have the same report? iStation's report is different. It's called the ISIP summary report. And we did not mention that one only because some schools do not necessarily have iStation as their diagnostic. I know certain schools have purchased it and have like licenses, and they do that specifically for iStation. And it is, iStation is the one that you will use for K2 reading for ELA. But in math, for the majority of it is this iReady diagnostic. Does that answer your question, David? Okay. Good question.
All right. So once you have looked at that data, you have them in the groupings. Next thing you need to do is really look at, is this data okay? Is it good data for you? Because what happens, as Jennifer said, a lot of the times kids won't take it too seriously, and you need to really decide, do they really need to move into tier 2? So you need to observe those kids. Fine point, if you go in there and look at numbers and operations, maybe that's something you have to see. Do they really need work on that? Maybe perform some quick formative assessments with the kid to make sure that that is the area. Then once you have done all of that work, pinpoint the specific area that you may need. For example, I was giving fractions as my example. Then here is what the next step is, we need to match the student with the intervention that has the highest probability of success. What we have put up here is Achieve the Core has a great site where it really tells you the different levels of where you should be focusing, what is the major work of the grade. And with that, if you have a kid in 3rd grade who took this diagnostic, they're having some issues in geometry. They're also having some issues in numbers and operations with fractions. If you were looking at this, something you would have to decide is, where should I focus my attention, knowing that they're really hurting in both areas. We're suggesting you need to probably focus on the area with the major work of the grade. That is the area that has the most bang for your buck, because that's the one that really does build on from one grade to the other. So if they're struggling in fractions in 3rd grade, just the introduction of fractions, they won't be able to add and subtract, they won't be able to multiply and divide as we progress up through the grades. So focus your area, and then once you have decided all their areas of need, you can hit that geometry later once you have really worked with them on tier 2, that they're like, yeah, they got this. I think we have a firm foundation. Then you can move on and decide to do that other area later. So delivering instruction, this is where your true interventions come in. All that stuff is leading up to this point. And what this point is, your small groups. We kept hitting small groups, small groups, small groups, because what happens is they need that small, almost one-on-one. Not a lot of times we can't do one-on-one, and so it's not like maybe 3 to 4 on 1. They need that small group so that they have more of your attention and really can focus areas of need. So that once you have decided to do that, you can do the guided math with them. When you do centers, one of the centers can be with you and you could be working with them. Remember, it has to be data driven. You can't just say, I thought it looked like Tammy is really just not doing okay on her counting backwards, so I'm just going to work with her on it. Tier 2 is not that. That is more your differentiation in your tier 1. Tier 2, you have to have true data proving that this is the area of need. So you have to go ahead and have that. Then you will have a program that is also watching this, and that's how you're monitoring it as well. I know a lot of times we have put in that they say you have to have a research-based program. This year, your research program is iReady for tier 2 intervention. So you can maybe once or twice or so put them on the iReady, but you still need to pull them out into the small group with you. What's happening is in the past with other people is they've just put them on the program and they call that their tier 2 intervention. You are not going to get the most bang for your buck. You do need to make sure you're doing those small groups as well as on the online, the tier 2 intervention. When you're working with them in small groups, please make sure to start with your concrete, go to representational, and then go to abstract when you're teaching a concept. We don't want to just say, oh, I'm noticing that they're not able to multiply fractions. Well, let's make sure, let's start with those concrete, some manipulatives, moving into other things to help them out. Again, in small groups, to model, explain, and think aloud. Make sure you're talking about the math to them. They're talking about the math back to you. Make sure you're giving immediate corrective feedback in those small groups. You notice we keep talking small groups as well as the program. And make sure those kids are talking to you, that they're just not going with the moving things around with the manipulatives, and then you're just like, yeah, that's correct, let's move on. No, make them talk to you about it. When they're able to describe what they're thinking to you, that's true understanding on their part. And of course, Jennifer and I put in there about mindset, because what happens is in elementary and middle school, somehow kids get this fear of math, which does affect them in the future. And so we also want to continue working on that mindset.
I just want to point out too, Tammy, that I talk about the iReady diagnostic. That is different from the iReady program, the online program that is going to be the Tier 2 intervention. That
Yes.
will also, like, we're going to learn about that later, but it will supply some of these lessons, some of these ideas of what to do with your students in that Tier 2 realm.
Next, once you have started that instruction, you've done your data, you started instruction, you now have to monitor. And your monitoring could be the iReady diagnostic, but it also could be when they're online doing their iReady lessons. You can actually track it, because you get all this information about them, what they're doing well and what they're not, what they're struggling with. So you're going to have to keep tracking it. And you have to make sure if you can exit them out and put them back into Tier 1, or if they've gone to SAT, you're going to have to document that data and move on. So in your SAT, if you're continuing doing that. And again, use reliable and valid measures when you're working at this. So that's why we keep saying use the data, use the data. The data, remember, is not like, I think I observed it once. No, it has to be like you're observing that kid 3 times in a week and you're working at it. You're bringing the iReady data. Next, you're going to be reflecting and responding to that information, intervention. Is this working for that kid? If it is not working, you got to tweak what your intervention is. If it is working for that kid, then what you're going to do with that kid. Are you going to exit them? Are you going to move them on to SAT? Or are you going to just give that information? So you need to make sure you're reflecting and responding.
All right. So I know we've been really quick and down and dirty about everything that we've talked to you today about Tier 2. Tammy did put in a PowerPoint, so if you kind of want to go back over some of those points, you will have that. You'll also have this recording. But we wanted to let you know there are some upcoming PDs that are going to be available. If you are a Title I school, and this is specifically only for those Title I schools, you may want to look into doing some PD into Advantage Math. And that is a really great, I shouldn't say it's a program, because it's not a program. It's more of a framework for you to be able to identify and kind of diagnose students at that more critical early age, and then to be able to intervene and handle those gaps before those gaps get a lot bigger. So that would be something that if you're interested in and you're in a Title I school, Title I can help get you in that particular training. We also want to put out that there will be some more training into how to use our online learning program for iReady. That's going to be coming up in some of the PDs most recently. Tammy and myself also, if you were looking back at that Tier 1 First Teach, we talk about those instructional routines. Number sense routines are a great way, a universal way, and can also be used in the Tier 2 realm in those smaller group capacities. That might be an opportunity for you to come to those as well. Those number sense routines, such as which ones doesn't belong, 3-act tasks, open middle, anything like that are really great, not only energizers for our kids, but they bring out that discourse that we need for our students. We also have making the most of your math block. If you didn't attend that one yesterday, we'll have more opportunities for that. That's going to kind of tell you a little bit about how to build your math block. We also have a curriculum adoption deep dive. We're in a year where we're still exploring those curriculums that we're going to get ready to vote on for next year, for which curriculum we're going to be choosing. And those are coming up. Take a look at those. And one thing that we're really especially excited about is that Tammy and I are going to be doing math communities. And those math communities, we're going to be offering them, I think it was every third Thursday of the month.
I think that's what we're going to be doing.
Okay. We haven't put them on the calendar yet, but they're coming, and we're gonna let either topics that you guys want to drive towards that, or it might be particular topics that we're hearing coming up a lot around. It could be specifically tied to these interventions. Maybe once we get a little bit more into like doing our specific interventions, we can talk a little bit more about those trainings. But there are plenty of opportunities out there for you to be able to learn more and definitely understand a little bit more with math. So I know we're getting really close to time, and we want to leave you guys a little space for questions if you have them, but we want to thank you for coming. Those emails are Tammy and my emails. You can definitely reach out to us if you want any support. We also wanted to let you know that you can request that we come to you and support you specifically. Either you can do it through this particular emails, or you can do that last one, the TLN team at APS. And in that specific request, we just ask you that you say, we would like support with math. It could be have us come in and demo a number sense routine. Have us help you work through building a particular math block. Maybe you have trouble with working on interventions with your kids. Anything and everything that we can help you in and around math, you can actually ask for us to come in directly with you. All right. Tammy, could you share that link for the slide deck again? Someone was asking in the chat.
Sure.
And really with that, we want to thank you guys for attending. We'll go ahead and stay on for a couple of more minutes, but that is tier 2 interventions in a very quick format. Thank you guys for coming today. And Ava, you have a question?
Yes, hi. I was just wondering, when is it usually the best time to give them the iReady diagnostic? Like, or when is it available, like the first one?
There'll be a window. There'll be, and this is something that when you get back to your sites, you can go ahead and ask probably the testing coordinator. I'm assuming that they're going to have somebody there that they're going to tell you those windows of when that diagnostic is open. Okay. And when and if that time comes, there are other things, and I know we're going to get this in our training, but there are ways to, like, PowerPoints that you can just share with the kids that kind of talk them through what they're going to see, what they're going to do, and you know, just different pointers of what you want them to be able to do so that they do their best work.
The window is open from the first day of school pretty much until like September 5th or something like that. Just giving you an idea when that window actually is. But I would not suggest to give it your first week of school. Yeah. First week of school, work on your routines, procedures, getting to know the kids, building that mathematics community, the community in your classroom, then give it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. That sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, let me just double check up here through the chat, see if there were any other questions, but if not, I think, Tammy, we're probably okay to stop the recording.
Perfect.
I just have a quick question really quick to finish off the summit. Are we supposed to pop into like a whole group meeting to finish timesheets or anything?
No. So what's going to happen is they're going to go ahead and send out a survey. If you signed in each morning,